General Hospital spoilers reveal that Alexis' explosive plan has been confirmed, a painful but unavoidable decision that the veteran lawyer had to make after many sleepless nights and careful consideration. Although Alexis initially did everything in her power to protect Christina from the legal consequences of cutting Ric's and Elizabeth's car brakes, an act that nearly cost Ric and Elizabeth their lives, she has now come to the conclusion that her daughter needs to face the truth and take responsibility for her actions. Sitting in her office overlooking Port Charles Harbor, Alexis realized that true love sometimes requires the hardest decisions, and this was undoubtedly one of the toughest decisions she's ever had to make. A significant shift in the plan to cover up Christina's crime occurred after a long consultation with Diane, who pointed out that sending Christina to a psychiatric facility as a legal loophole might only be a temporary solution and wouldn't address the underlying issue. Diane emphasized that Christina needed to face the consequences of her actions to truly heal and grow. During a long meeting at Alexis' office, with cups of cold coffee left on the table, Diane gently but firmly explained the situation and the legal risks of covering up Christina's crime. Diane also warned Alexis that with the evidence currently available, building a credible mental health case would be difficult, especially considering Christina planned and executed her actions with full awareness and intent. The evidence suggested that Christina had carefully planned her actions, waiting for the right moment, and carried them out with clear intent, all of which weakened any argument about a temporary mental condition. Diane reminded Alexis that Christina was no longer an impulsive child, but an adult who made conscious decisions to harm others, and although there could be mitigating factors, it didn't absolve her of responsibility. Ric and Ava, both pressuring Alexis, also played a part in Alexis' decision to turn Christina into the police, a decision she never thought she would have to make. Ric, still recovering from the accident and filled with rightful anger, threatened to pursue the case to the fullest if Christina wasn't adequately punished. In a tense meeting in his hospital room, Ric didn't hide his intentions to make sure every piece of evidence came to light. As a victim and a lawyer, he swore to follow the case to the end. He emphasized that not only had he nearly lost his life, but Elizabeth had also been at risk, and the victims of this crime deserved justice. Elizabeth, though silent during the confrontation, communicated her pain through her sorrowful eyes, not just from the physical injuries but from the emotional betrayal of knowing that Christina, someone she had known since childhood, was willing to risk her life. Meanwhile, Ava continued to pressure Alexis using video evidence of Christina's crime as a tool for blackmail, not only against Alexis but also Sonny. In a private meeting at Alexis' living room, Ava played the security footage clearly showing Christina cutting Ric's car brakes. With her phone in hand, Ava implied that if Alexis and Sonny didn't help solve her financial issues, the video would be sent to the police. Ava emphasized that prison was no place for someone like Christina and she wouldn't survive, a remark designed to put maximum pressure on Alexis. Faced with pressure from both sides, and realizing there was no easy way out, Alexis made the hardest decision of her life. She handed Christina over to the police. She believed that by doing this, Christina could have a chance for a fair trial, possibly invoking mitigating circumstances, and most importantly, begin the process of truly confronting the issues that led to her criminal behavior. This wasn't a decision made lightly. Alexis spent many sleepless nights considering all possible options, consulting Diane, and even seeking advice from Kevin Collins, a respected psychiatrist. The conclusion she reached was not easy, but it was the one she believed was right, not only legally but morally and even maternally. When Alexis finally told Christina about her decision, the young woman's reaction was a mix of betrayal, fear, and even a hint of relief. Deep down, Christina knew what she did was wrong, and the weight of this secret had been weighing on her. While the thought of facing the justice system scared her, the idea of finally taking responsibility seemed to bring a sense of release. Christina cried, accusing her mother of betraying her, but Alexis remained steadfast, explaining that it was because of her love for Christina that she had to do this. Alexis promised to fight for her daughter with everything she had, ensuring the court understood all the factors leading to Christina's actions. This decision caused a deep rift between Alexis and Sonny, who still wanted to protect their daughter at any cost, but Alexis stood her ground, believing this was the only path to truly save Christina, not only from prison but from herself. The confrontation between them at Sonny's house grew intense, with Sonny accusing Alexis of betraying their daughter, while Alexis retorted that Sonny's approach to parenting, particularly his willingness to shield their children from consequences, had contributed to Kristina's current problems. As Alexis prepared to carry out her plan, she knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. She would have to face not only Sunny's opposition but also Kristina's anger and sense of betrayal, Ava's ongoing threats, and the legal challenges Diane had warned her about. But she also knew, in her heart, that this was the right thing to do, not only legally but morally and as a mother. As Alexis gazed out at the Port Charles harbor, the setting sun casting a brilliant orange hue over the water, she braced herself for the tough days ahead. She knew her decision wouldn't be supported by everyone, that she might lose her daughter's love for a time, but she also believed that sometimes, true love requires making the hardest choices. And for Alexis, there was no harder decision than forcing her daughter to face the consequences of her wrongdoing, but there was also no decision more important in helping Kristina eventually grow up and learn to take responsibility for her life. Ric and Ava are reeling from Alexis' actions, which have completely upended their plans, leaving them in an unexpected and precarious situation. Ric, who had meticulously prepared to pursue justice for the accident he and Elizabeth were victims of, couldn't hide his shock upon learning that Alexis, whom he thought would do everything to protect her daughter, was the one who proactively took Kristina to the police to confess. This move stripped Ric of his most powerful bargaining chip, his ability to threaten and pressure Alexis by promising to prosecute Kristina to the fullest. Now that Alexis had done it herself, Ric lost the psychological advantage he thought he had over his ex-wife. Ava, on the other hand, was completely blindsided by Alexis' bold move. With the video footage of Kristina's crime in her hands, Ava had thought she held the perfect bargaining tool, a weapon she could use to blackmail both Alexis and Sunny for a long time. But now that Kristina had confessed and the video had become public evidence, its value had plummeted to almost nothing. Ava could no longer threaten to expose the secret when it was no longer a secret, and she lost her chance to make a large sum of money to solve her financial problems. A new dynamic is emerging as Ric and Alexis are forced to face each other in an entirely new context. No longer adversaries in a legal battle over Kristina's crime, they now have to reshape their relationship in the light of Alexis' unexpected decision. Ric, who had prepared himself to fight Alexis in court, now faced a situation he wasn't sure how to react to, feeling both gratitude for Alexis doing the right thing and continued anger over what Kristina had done to him and Elizabeth. For Alexis, turning Kristina in wasn't just about doing what was legally and morally right, it was also about taking control of a situation where Ric and Ava thought they had power over her. By proactively bringing Kristina to justice, Alexis took the reins of the situation, refusing to let Ric or Ava use her daughter's crime as a tool to manipulate her. It was an act of strength, not weakness, and it completely shifted the dynamics between her and Ric. Now, as they're forced to work together through the legal process, Alexis as Kristina's defense lawyer and Ric as the victim and potential witness, they must navigate a relationship that's been scarred by years of animosity and competition. A new obsession is emerging as Ric begins to view Alexis in a new light, not as an enemy or opponent, but as a woman with enough courage and integrity to place justice above personal emotions. This is a quality Ric has always admired, but rarely seen in Alexis in recent years, and it has awakened feelings he thought he'd buried long ago. For Alexis, facing Ric is no longer about confrontation, but about finding a way to collaborate to ensure Kristina gets the help she needs while also ensuring justice is served. This is a complex situation that requires them to put their past differences aside and focus on a common goal, helping Kristina through this difficult time with as little damage as possible. As Ric and Alexis begin working together, initially reluctantly but gradually with increasing respect, Port Charles witnesses a changing story, one not just about justice and consequences, but about forgiveness, reconciliation, and the ability to grow and change even after the deepest wounds. And as Kristina begins to face the consequences of her actions, she may find that her mother's decision, though painful, has paved the way for a kind of healing she could never have achieved if she continued living in the shadow of her unacknowledged guilt. Alexis and Diane are planning to send Kristina to Ferncliff for treatment, a bold and risky legal strategy that the two veteran attorneys have developed after hours of careful analysis of the situation. Instead of having Kristina face the usual criminal justice system, they are trying to convince the court that her actions were the result of a temporary mental condition, caused by accumulated trauma and an unhealthy obsession with Ava. Ferncliff, a well-known psychiatric facility in Port Charles, will be where Christina receives the necessary treatment while still being closely monitored, a compromise between enforcing justice and protecting Christina from the harsh environment of prison. The unfolding story is escalating as the involved parties react to this plan. Sonny, initially opposed to Alexis handing Christina over to the police, has now shifted to supporting the Ferncliff solution, even using his influence and resources to ensure Christina will be treated well there. Kevin Collins, the top psychologist in Port Charles, has agreed to evaluate Christina and provide his expertise to support this legal strategy. Even Elizabeth, after taking time to reflect and talk to Lucky, has started to empathize with Christina's mental state and supports treatment over punishment. One new pressure emerging from this situation is Christina, faced with the prospect of being confined to Ferncliff, is beginning to confront her deep-seated psychological issues. During initial evaluations with Kevin, she started to explore the root of her obsession with Ava, realizing that it wasn't just related to recent events but also stemmed from deeper issues of insecurity, feeling unprotected, and her complex relationship with her parents. The pressure to face these uncomfortable truths, combined with the looming prospect of being confined in a psychiatric facility, has pushed Christina to the brink of a total psychological breakdown. A state that, ironically, could actually strengthen Alexis and Diane's argument for her unstable mental condition. This situation is causing one of the biggest setbacks for Ava and Ric. Ava, who had intended to use Christina's crime as a tool for blackmail, has now lost that leverage and is forced to face the exposure of her own blackmailing actions. In a tactical move, Alexis revealed Ava's blackmail attempt to the police, turning the blackmailer into the one under investigation. This has put Ava in a difficult legal position, with the threat of facing charges for blackmail and obstruction of justice, charges that could affect her custody rights over Avery. Ric, meanwhile, finds himself in a morally and legally complicated situation. While he still wants Christina to face the consequences of her actions, Alexis' legal strategy has placed him in a position where he must oppose a more humane approach. A position that could damage his public image and even affect his relationship with Molly, who has expressed support for treatment for her sister. Furthermore, Diane has cleverly suggested that Ric might have been aware of Christina's mental instability but chose not to act, an implication that could undermine his legal standing and shift some moral responsibility onto him. As the situation continues to unfold, Port Charles is witnessing one of the most complex legal and psychological cases in its history. Alexis, with Diane's support, is navigating a complex legal maze to protect her daughter by ensuring she receives the necessary help while avoiding the harshest consequences of the criminal justice system. Sonny, though initially opposed, has begun to understand and even admire Alexis' strategy, realizing that sometimes love requires difficult decisions. And Christina, facing the consequences of her actions for the first time in her life, is beginning a long and painful journey toward healing and self-awareness, a journey that, ironically, may never have begun if not for Alexis' initial difficult decision. The failure of the blackmail plot has now led to a new obsession over control as Ava and Ric begin to act crazily toward each other. The complete collapse of the blackmail scheme has pushed both of them into a desperate situation, forcing them to ally in an unwilling but dangerous partnership. Ava, with her cunning and adaptability, quickly shifted from blackmailing to attempting to sabotage the plan to send Christina to Ferncliff. She's using all her relationships and influence to find information that could undermine Alexis and Diane's legal strategy, from digging into Christina's past to trying to sway members of the Ferncliff board. Ric, although initially reluctant to work with Ava, whom he still views as a threat and opportunist, has realized that this alliance may be his last chance to achieve justice in the way he believes is right. His obsession with seeing Christina punished has now eclipsed compassion and even reasonable consideration, making him willing to team up with someone who, under any other circumstances, he would consider an enemy. Ava and Ric's new controlling actions are becoming bolder and riskier. Ava has begun approaching other members of the Corinthos family, probing for potential rifts in the family dynamics that she could exploit. She has especially targeted Michael, who has a complex relationship with his father and might be persuaded that Alexis' approach to Christina's situation is too lenient. Meanwhile, Ric is using his legal position to pressure the justice system, arguing in court that Christina should be tried as an adult fully capable of being held responsible for her actions. One of the new elements that's driving everything further is the emergence of unexpected allies on both sides. Ava has successfully convinced Nicholas Cassadine, with whom she has a complex relationship, that Christina should face the full legal consequences of her actions. With his wealth and influence, Nicholas could be a powerful ally in pressuring the justice system. On the other hand, Ric has sought support from Scott Baldwin, a lawyer with a history of clashes with Alexis and no hesitation about using controversial tactics to achieve his goals. On Alexis' side, she has received unexpected support from Elizabeth, who everyone assumed would side with Ric. Elizabeth, with her personal experience with mental health issues and deep compassion as a nurse, has begun to doubt that Ric's hardline approach is the best solution for Christina or even for him. Her support for the Ferncliff plan has created a rift between her and Ric, a rift that Alexis and Diane could exploit in their legal strategy. As this legal and psychological battle continues to escalate, the lines between right and wrong, justice and revenge, are becoming increasingly blurred. Each side believes they're doing the right thing, and each is willing to push moral boundaries to achieve their goal. And at the center of all this is Christina, who is not only facing the consequences of her actions but also becoming a pawn in a much larger power struggle. As the situation continues to evolve, Port Charles is witnessing one of the most intense legal and personal battles in its history. With such strong and determined personalities like Alexis, Diane, Ric, and Ava involved, no one can be sure that true justice will prevail, or whether personal motives and revenge will ultimately shape the outcome. One thing is certain. This battle will leave deep scars on everyone involved, and Port Charles will never be the same.